Oh, I knew looking at the camera. Is that where okay, I just want to make sure I'm here, bro.
You good now?
Yeah.
You sure?
Yeah, let's get it, bro.
All right. You ready? You ready for this?
Hello, audience.
So with the new year comes a new wave of Dynasty players. If you're among that group, if you're making that initial leap from Redraft to Dynasty Leagues, there are a litany of do's and don'ts to navigate. However, one of the main distinctions between your annual Redraft League and Dynasty League necessitates that you are responsive and relatively active when it comes to making trades. Of course, building a quality roster via your Dynasty startup draft goes a long way, but in order to maintain a competitive roster year to year, having success in your subsequent rookie drafts is only half the battle. You have to cultivate your ability to execute a Dynasty football trade with a lasting return on investment. For those of you that are incredibly conservative in terms of making trades in your redraft leagues, be prepared to step outside of your comfort zone. If you want to remain competitive, that is. If you opt to churn your roster via the waiver wire in lieu of making trades, you'll quickly learn that your options in Dynasty Leagues are far fewer. Of course, there are larger rosters in Dynasty Leagues compared to Redraft Leagues. This is impractical. On the other hand, if you have a predisposition for being trade happy, you may need to temper your exuberance and practice a little more patience. The aforementioned are fantasy football strategies, or rather philosophies, that may have served you well in the redraft arena and could very well lead to fleeting success in dynasty leagues, but they simply aren't sustainable. The good news is that there have been plenty of us who have had to learn the hard way. With the benefit of hindsight, I'm going to cover several best practices that I've learned over the years playing dynasty football in my efforts to trade effectively in dynasty leagues. Please take into consideration that these are steps that I've taken that have benefited me. This may not necessarily work for everyone else, but certainly you may want to consider it. All right. This is not a definitive list of what you have to do in order to be successful in terms of making dynasty trades. But I do believe that these best practices can be applied in most instances, certainly. All right, the first best practice I'm going to cover is buy talent, overstand opportunity. And when I indicate overstand, I'm not necessarily referring to the nautical term, but I'm suggesting an understanding that goes beyond the typical, beyond the surface level. If you participated in redraft leagues for an extended period of time, you've certainly heard the saying, volume is king, or some variation of that idiom. This remains true in dynasty leagues, but should be weighed slightly differently, in my opinion. I believe one should aim to acquire talent with, at minimum, a fairly distinct path to opportunity. That doesn't mean that opportunity, or more specifically, volume, is immediately available, but there is a defined path to said volume. This happens frequently with rookies. Most rookies, even when selected early in the NFL draft, have to earn their opportunities, work their way up the respective depth chart, establish a certain level of trust with the coaching staff. However, seasoned dynasty enthusiasts will prioritize or bet on the individual's talent rather than their current circumstances. Take, for example, Christian McCaffrey. Somewhat of an extreme example because he was a very early first round pick, particularly at the running back position. Generally, we're not seeing running backs go in the top 10. But the McCaffrey situation as a rookie entering the league, it illustrates the point quite well. You may recall during his rookie season, which was in 2017, McCaffrey received fewer carries than Jonathan Stewart, the incumbent, was well past his prime, as well as quarterback Cam Newton. McCaffrey's heavy usage in the passing game may have pacified some of his owners, but his meager rushing totals and scoring opportunities obviously disappointed. His opportunity as a ball carrier had not yet been realized. But if you believed in his ability to do so and wagered that the battery of Stewart and Newton would eventually give way to McCaffrey's talent, that would have been the ideal time to trade for the all pro running back. Perhaps an even better example would be Derrick Henry. It wasn't until year three, which was in 2018, that Henry led the Tennessee Titans in rushing attempts. And it wasn't until year four, 2019, that he received the vast majority of the carries in Tennessee's backfield. The writing was on the wall during 2017, but DeMarco Murray, Dion Lewis, and the Titans coaching staff kept Henry on ice for much longer than any of us anticipated. But eventually, his talent rewarded those who either held onto their initial investment or were shrewd enough to pull off a dynasty trade and acquire him around the 2017-18 bend. You have to recall, Murray had a real big bounce back after flaming out in Philadelphia. Dion Lewis was brought in on a big contract from New England. Considering how dominant Henry was at Alabama and the flashes that we got to see, particularly when he was able to get to the second level, it truly was just a matter of time. Those were older backs. Lewis obviously had his injury history. Murray, just didn't have quite as much tread on the tire. Titans were a physical run first type of attack. All came together, and ultimately Henry's talent paid off. Next up, we have familiarize yourself with contract details and depth charts. Now, this also speaks to overstanding opportunity. To overstand opportunity and execute a quality dynasty trade, it behooves you to familiarize yourself with contract details, as well as each team's depth chart. Now, the advent of the depth chart is probably old news to you. However, it takes on more significance considering dynasty rosters, as I mentioned before, are almost double the size of redraft rosters, if not more. As for the contract details, let's consider Chase Claypool, rookie wide receiver for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Claypool entered the 2020 NFL season no better than the fourth option among wide receivers in Pittsburgh. However, he quickly supplanted teammate James Washington in terms of playing time by week 3. I was particularly excited about Claypool's prospects for 2021, as you may have known, having visited this channel before, and insisted that dynasty owners buy Claypool after week 2 prior to his 4 TD outbursts in week 5. My conviction was steeped in Claypool's talent and the belief that Juju Smith-Schuster would be an unrestricted free agent at year's end. He's on an expiring contract, his rookie contract. Furthermore, Pittsburgh typically doesn't give their wideouts lucrative contract extensions, i.e. Plaxico Burress, Mike Wallace, Emmanuel Sanders. So what did we have here? We had convergence. Claypool's talent plus Juju's expiring contract, that's your fairly distinct opportunity, equals dynasty trade target in my book. Let's set aside trade theory and talk practical application for a bit. Not every dynasty football trade you make is initiated by you. Not every initial offer will result in an accepted trade. In fact, negotiations can go on for days, which likely will include a series of counteroffers. However, simply making a counteroffer during negotiations without providing any context or engaging the other team owner in dialogue is incredibly inefficient and can be counterproductive. Trades aren't unilateral. Let me repeat that. Trades aren't unilateral. Establish effective lines of communication, leverage technology where appropriate, to aid in executing your dynasty trade. This builds rapport and fosters future trade opportunities, assuming you're negotiating in good faith. Moving right along, sell high, buy low after and during primetime games. The power of social media, folks. There's nothing quite like a particularly impressive performance by a player when the masses are watching. Let's face it, human beings are impressionable and are apt to become prisoners of the moment. If the sheer amount of money poured into marketing and advertising has taught us anything, the more one is bombarded with a particular message or image, the more likely the target demographic is likely to subscribe to it. I witnessed this phenomenon on a weekly basis this past season, whether on Twitter, league-wide group chats, or in casual conversation at work the following day. Nothing increases or diminishes a player's dynasty value outside of an injury more than a big or poor performance during a nationally televised game in prime time. I suggest capitalizing and executing a dynasty trade or two by putting a singular primetime performance in its proper perspective. If you're familiar with any of our dynasty content on this channel, we often talk in terms of the dynasty stock market. And if you're an investor, a lot of times, I'm sure at some point throughout your history of investing, your career of investing, is you've heard the term FOMO and people chasing after a particular stock. That's what happens during these primetime games. So you don't want to succumb to that, but you can take advantage of that. So the next best practice I have to offer is one that I've recently adapted, and that's leveraging the trade calculator, even if you do not subscribe to it. There are a lot of free and proprietary Dynasty Football trade tools available. One quick Google search would retrieve plenty of options. However, I recommend utilizing the Dynasty Trade Calculator. This is not a sponsored plug by any means, nor do I personally consult the Dynasty Trade Calculator when deciding to accept an offer. However, many Dynasty enthusiasts do, and the MFL Dynasty platform interfaces with the Dynasty Trade Calculator, by the way. You'll quickly learn who uses a calculator because they will often try to convince you that their trade proposal benefits you more because the calculator reflects as much. This may or may not be true. It ultimately boils down to how you value the players and draft picks in question. You may dismiss the offer, but do not dismiss the utility of the calculator. If a fellow Dynasty owner considers the calculator their guiding light, use the calculator to help you craft your Dynasty football trade. This will assist in bridging gaps in the negotiation and save you time. As I mentioned before, Dynasty football trade negotiations can take days, even weeks. There is validity to striking while the iron is hot, but do not make knee-jerk or impetuous decisions. In other words, don't succumb to the primetime spike. Furthermore, give the other owner a reasonable but definitive amount of time to consider your trade, offer, or counter. Perhaps more importantly, exercise patience with your most talented players. Sometimes the dynasty football trade you don't make is the best option. Guys, that was really where I had planned on ending this particular video, but I want to give you a couple more bonus items, some takeaways, a couple of the things that really have made a difference in terms of my success in dynasty leagues is understanding when you're in a rebuild. I am incredibly competitive, and the thing about football, that ball is shaped funny, it's oblong, the bounces, the things that happen, the way you win in certain weeks, it's crazy. And you get on a little bit of a winning streak, you think your team can compete with anybody, but the reality is that you don't have the staying power. You have to be able to discern that. You have to be able to make that determination in dynasty leagues. That allows you to get ahead of the curve the following season and the subsequent seasons from there on out. So understanding when to fold, when to go all in, when to push your chips all the way in the middle, and when to fold. All right, so the last best practice I have to offer, bonus best practice, is avoid becoming enamored with rookies or incoming rookies. Dynasty leagues have a way of devaluing veterans, but there are certain players in this league at certain positions that absolutely year in and year out are going to be in the conversation as the one or two of the best at their particular position, and they're generally not rookies. That's just the nature of the business. So you have to be careful. Absolutely understand, making sure that you balance that you have a nice influx of youth as well as some elder statesmen on your roster. You're always going to be churning the bottom of your roster in some capacity, whether it be through trades or that rookie draft. But certainly do not lose sight of how effective and consistent certain veterans are, and try not to overvalue rookies in their stead. You guys have anything that you'd like to add? I certainly understand if you want to keep it close to the vest, but if there's anything that you'd like to add, please leave a comment down below.